good afternoon, and welcome to MWW Talks Wellness. I'm John Diggles, Executive Vice President at MWW and head of our health and wellness practice. And I'm joined today by a really good friend and a powerful and trusted industry voice, Danielle Lynn. Hi, Danielle.
Hi, how are you?
I want to do the intro for you, Danielle, because I can say things that she can't say. Danielle is not only the creator and host of a internationally syndicated radio show, Danielle Lynn, The Art and Science of Life, but she's a recognized expert in the space. Companies, brands, consumers have been turning to Danielle Lynn for some time to get her perspective on how health and wellness is developing and how brands are connecting with consumers. So, Danielle, I've known you for quite some time. You've got great perspective, and I really appreciate you taking time to join us today.
I'm so glad. It's just a wonderful thing, and you've done a great job in the industry for people who didn't understand combining that together and closing the gap between these great products and really going direct to the consumers, especially when we talk about ingredients. So thank you for doing that. It's helped me, and it's helped all of us.
Thank you. And it's been a wild ride, too, right?
Yeah, wild ride. I know. I said, well, we could just start chatting. I have known John for many, many, many years and known him in all kinds of avenues of being incredible in the movie industry. You have such a stellar background. And so to see what you're doing now with the health and wellness sector, I'm really excited to see the next couple of years how it shifts just because of what you contribute. So very fun. Very glad to be doing this.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and thanks to all of you for joining us here. I want to start with actually, for those of you who have joined this talk session, we're actually going to make an announcement right at the top here, and congratulations to Danielle. Danielle has just signed a new book deal. She signed it with Sterling Lord Literaristic. Her new book on raw ingredients is expected to come out in spring 2016. Danielle, congratulations to you.
Yeah, so exciting. Had no idea where it even came from except for all the years of hanging out with people who were making such a difference in the world with, you don't understand how raw is so relevant. And that I was watching the movie The Avatar the other night, and in the middle of the movie, he stopped and he said, he talked about raw materials in countries, raw materials in places, and they're so relevant to our life. So that's what the book is about, and how it affects us in the economy and commerce and health, and really everything to do with the way we move money and how we choose to live politically. So it'll be very exciting. I'm thrilled.
Well, congratulations on the book.
Thanks.
And I can't wait to see it, and we'll have another session to talk about it. And of course, look, today is the kickoff of World Cup. So at the end of this, as a matter of fact, Brazil and Croatia are kicking off this hour. So at the end of this session, we're going to do a World Cup toast. So if you have bottled water or a healthy beverage near you, prepare it. And at the end of the Q&A here, we will toast to the kickoff of World Cup. Danielle, I'd like to start talking a bit about health and wellness brands and trust. And we did a social search as we prepared for this session. We were looking at some of the tweets the last few days and just this afternoon. And it's so interesting to see a lot of health and wellness tweets are very positive and about advice. But also we do always see with consumers a lot of concern. Hey, is this really organic? Does this brand know what this means? Is this really non-GMO? And even things like, hey, this is a protein drink. It says great taste on the front of it. I know it's a good drink, but man, it doesn't taste very good. What are you seeing, or what do you hear about sort of the claims that products make, whether that's ingredients or taste, and how consumers are actually seeing that pull through in delivery?
Well, it's exactly, you and I have spoken about this for years. It pulls through in that consumers are becoming more aware, number one. If you say you're going to sell a product or you put it in the store, the first thing they do is what? They Google it. So they're getting more educated. And about 15, 17 years ago, whenever our industry started a trade event, there were only about 3 branded raw materials back then. Pycnogenol was one of them, ester C, Wakanaga, kyolic garlic. So the consumers really didn't know that it was the raw materials. And then you had branded names. But it got to the point, because of all of the industry going global, that now ingredients are the key. So when you look at a brand, you want to go to ingredients first, because branded materials that are now certified, that's where you can find safety in a lot of the products.
And safety is a really big part of this as well. There's There's news in the industry right now about the ingredients within joint health supplements. That yes, these ingredients are there, but also traces of something else were there that potentially made them unsafe. And that's a real conversation. I think when things like that happen, it not only affects certain products that it came under that testing, but it can really affect sales in the whole category.
Yeah, it happened with tryptophan. If you remember years ago, there was one bad batch in Japan, and suddenly tryptophan was gone, and it never came back. Came back as 5-HTP, but you never saw tryptophan again, which was one of the best sleeping aids in the early days when there were sleeping aids that were coming out from pharmaceutical companies. So it'll either kill a brand completely and you'll never see it again, or they will definitely have a struggle coming back. So safety, companies working with organizations that test for them, as a consumer, it's worth inquiring.
And we're seeing it. I mean, obviously, we're talking today about health and wellness brands for consumers and things that consumers would ingest. But we're also seeing it even with something like the issue of dog treats from China. We've seen a huge pushback now on the dog treats, jerky treats that are not healthy or didn't live up to what they promised as far as what they were going to deliver to pets, and they've been pulled out of a lot of stores. So certainly a lot more savvy consumers becoming it, and we're seeing the pressure put on these stores and chains and retailers to say, if the perception is you're not safe, we can't even carry you. Danielle, when you think about certain brands and categories that have been really affected by that over the years, how have you seen them? Have you seen sales slide, and how long has it taken to sort of recover from that kind of, hey, you've been identified as a bad actor?
Well, it may be in one way generational, and it may be that consumers never really get the hit as much as we do in the industry. So if you think about it, recently there was a protein shake that had a bit of a shakeup, if you will, when they delivered that product. And I knew about it, you knew about it, and the industry knew about it, but the consumer probably never found out. So it just depends on how far the PR is, how far it got out to the public. If it didn't get out and it was an industry, probably the distribution gets into question, and so you pull back. But I think the consumer's almost the last to hear about something unless unless the news catches it.
And Danielle, we obviously this starts at the label, right? This starts at what you say is on your label. We saw a big Supreme Court decision come today for Palm Health that's really going to have an issue across the labels and FDA. So it starts with the label. But obviously, consumers have right on their smartphones. They can do so much research. They can check on Twitter to see what are people saying about this. What are the reviews? What's the latest news coverage on it? And they can do that right from their phones at the point of sale. Do you feel that enough health and wellness brands are looking at that whole game plan about how they're going to educate and make sure that, yeah, it goes beyond the label to live up and say, this is how we're delivering on our promise?
Oh, I would like to say yes to that question, but I have to say, I'll give you an example. Years ago, I launched a food product. It was one of the first healthy fast foods with soy. And it was the beginning, and we did it on a machine where the dough had never been stretched before, and we were trying to figure it out, and we finally figured it out. And when I went to market, one of the ingredients that I was seeking, I wanted to be organic. And it was the very beginning when you didn't have a lot of organic ingredients. And what I can tell you is the people that were selling me the ingredients said, Danielle, don't worry about it. No one's even going to know. Just put it on the label. And quite honestly, I walked away from the company and my product because I couldn't deliver the truth.
Yeah.
I think people will get away with for a while, but is it getting better? Absolutely. And it's because of the consumer. It's because of the Google searching and everybody talking to each other. Yeah, that's the big thing, talking to each other.
Right. And we see this, we see it pull through all the time. Products say, hey, they're vegetarian, and then somebody will find, hey, there's traces of milk in this product.
Very, very common.
We see that kind of stuff happen, and it seems to have real kind of trust impact because you weren't transparent with me, or I put something in my body that I did not want to have there because I trusted you. And it's really hard to get that back. When you think about all the communications vehicles and things like your radio show, when you've had a lot of conversations over time about ingredients and new products and launches, how much is trust embedded in all of those kinds of conversations?
It's, well, let's say that it's everything. You know, it's everything with my sponsors. Like every sponsor that's on my show is picked by me. I pretty much do the due diligence so that the consumer doesn't have to. That was the reason for the show, was just that you could trust that if you listened, we were going to give you the best, and we were going to do that homework for you. Mrs. Gooch, Sandy Gooch, did that in the early days before Whole Foods, and I think that whole thing is really. It's a very tough line because we're becoming more conscious, as I said a moment ago, but we're also expanding so rapidly as an industry, and because we're reaching out internationally. I met a gentleman the other night from Tanzania, and he was saying we have so many raw materials there. Well, now we have to have a whole tracking system on countries. So I think when I tell people on the radio, I'm so big on branded raw materials, branded ingredients from the back end first, and then you can also associate that with a brand that's the finished product. And if a consumer starts to do their homework, they'll find that there are some pretty strong brands that really consistently deliver amazing products, and they do their homework. So there are plenty of people out there doing it right, no doubt about it. And it's very important that you keep in that relationship.
And when it's good points, Danielle. When you think about uh, brands and people, even startups, even smaller brands we see doing it right,
Hmm.
what do you think? What are steps that are there? What are steps they are taking to really build trust for their product and live up to their claims? What do you see them do?
Do your homework. You know, I got mercury poisoning from amalgams in my fillings and from seafood, eating tuna. I went through this phase. I was vegetarian for many, many years, and then I went through this transition and I ate tuna for about a year, and I got mercury poisoning. And I can tell you that it's mercury in, excuse me, not so easy mercury out. And I learned a lot about the industry. And so I tell the consumer, trace back, ask questions. For the people that are bringing products to market, there are substantial organizations now that absolutely can clear your product, can test your product, can give you the certification that you need to have. It's so important because consumers are going to, it's not just let's get a product. Consumers will take you out, but certification will keep you in. So I think it's really important to make sure you just start at the very base.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of that as well, and we're seeing brands sort of their trust playbook, if you will, is come out, have sound clinical research, introducing a new product, be very transparent about ingredients, educate your target audience about specific ingredients. In a lot of cases, branded ingredients play a huge role in this, as you're saying, Danielle. We're also seeing them go deeper on their website and then choose third parties to help them tell. So whether that's researchers for the clinical or other scientists or even medical professionals to come in, registered dietitians to talk about it as a third party. Here's the experience you have. Taste is becoming even bigger, as we were mentioning on the protein shake. That
Yeah.
hey, look, if you're telling it's really good taste, and taste is subjective, but you still should have other third parties tell it from a consumer perspective. Yeah, this is good. Hey, my 10-year-old loves it. That really matters. And of course, finding every ways to communicate that, not only in a digital sense on your website, but even in social media. It just seems to me that that sort of information is education. It is so key, and it should be available to consumers who are trying to find it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. How do you get out there? And taste is so subjective. I have done every protein bar in the industry. And I can tell you, just because I travel, and I call it executive food now, you've got to have this survival kit when you go out on the road.
Yeah.
So I've gone through every protein bar. Very few give a great taste, and the ones that give a great taste have too much sugar in them. So that's a bit of the problem with the taste factor. It's getting to a point now where I think the sophisticated person who's choosing a healthy lifestyle is willing to sacrifice some of that. So this isn't going to be this isn't going to be a a creme brulee. This is not going to taste like that. But what it's going to do for you is so valuable. So I think there's this fine play between how good can you make something really taste without taking it across the board. Like gluten-free has a huge challenge right now. This whole category for gluten-free, what they did was they made it gluten-free, but they loaded it with unprocessed food, products and ingredients, and they put a lot of sugar in it. So now we're tracking back from that. It's like, I went gluten-free, but not sugar-free. So
Right.
again, I think we're in such a transitional period for the next 3-4 years where we are really going to change as an industry. But trust is everything, and you sacrifice a little taste if you're going to stay healthy.
Yeah. And it's a good point because we do see these trends, right? And we see brands
Hmm.
really jeopardize the trust in the brand. We saw the fat-free trend in the 90s,
Yeah.
right? We're living in the gluten-free trend right now, and just pulling something out isn't enough. You still have to make sure the other ingredients are living up to this person's not only seeking gluten-free, but they're seeking a healthy lifestyle option, and to load it up with other things to try to cover that. You still want to give a good experience, but let's be transparent about it. I went through this too. We were rolling out a vitamin line, and the vegetarian capsules that we had, we didn't do too well in shipping. They were breaking a lot, and we had to go
Hmm.
with a protein-based capsule until we could figure it out. And we had to be transparent, and we took some heat for it. But the bottom line is we were transparent about it, and then later when we could roll out the vegetarian capsule, people bought into it. They trusted us, and they said, "Hey, at least you're telling me this is what it is now, and I believe you."
Yeah, and the truth be told, what's the percentage of people that even realize the difference between a vegetarian capsule? So you play to the smallest minority to be honest and authentic, but the truth is the masses are still trying to figure out. They're not even looking at the kind of capsules. They're still trying to figure out what do I do now? I have no clue how to eat anymore. And like you were saying before we got on the air about this new trend about a cup of coffee and a dunk of butter. And I just said, yeah, if you live in the Himalayas and you're taking yak butter, maybe, but it just seemed like you got to be so careful with what people put up on the internet, and especially like slamming something in the YouTube.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
But you bring up something that I think is fascinating. We sit with marketers and we sit with brand formulators, and a lot of it is the same thing. It's like most people aren't going to care that this is our capsule or that there's a little trace of iron in there, but it won't matter, right? It's that 1% that can get really loud, really fast.
yeah.
And it's just a few of you can have 3 or 4 people that notice it and they amplify it, and they could have the right level of social influence, and they could sink a product pretty quickly and hurt your trust pretty quickly.
And
They're
it
just
will happen.
You bet, yeah. Especially in the wellness space, to me, that seems to be something that it could be violent and it can happen overnight if you're not transparent about it. And if the right person sees what you've tried to do, if you haven't told it, and they tell your story, now you're trying to catch up and fix the damage.
Well, and also for the pioneers that are listening. And I seem to, I've been a pioneer in the industry for so many years, and I just seem to always be ahead of the curve. And I only brought one product, well, two products to market. And I have to say, I brought one brain product to the market, and I called it Brain Enhancers. And it was this lovely, amazing product based with phosphatidylserine, which was my favorite raw material in the world. Totally works if you want your memory, short-term memory, to kick in gear. And we went to market, and it was ahead of the curve. Focus Factor hadn't come out yet. We were pioneering this new ingredient. And literally people would say to me, oh, no, 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 no. I don't think I should enhance my brain. I don't want to put anything in my brain. And I'm like, where do you think it goes when it goes in your stomach? And so we sold all the bottles, and then I decided not to do any finished product, because I'm a broadcaster, and in those days you just didn't do it. That's over now. But yeah, you have to also know that sometimes it's just you go to the market, you don't know what the market's going to tell you. It's the market, sometimes it'll define the end.
And Danielle, you and I talk a lot about the research that comes out for health and wellness brands, and the difference in having, say, third-party, peer-reviewed, published research when a brand makes that investment, and the transparency that comes with that versus, hey, we did this in our laboratory and our first floor, and our scientists looked at it, and we just issued it from there. That there is a difference as far as having something peer-reviewed and published. And yes, it's an investment. But the difference in science and what that means to people in the know, whether that's medical professionals or RDs or even really informed consumers, that's a big difference in what that means for science.
Yeah, and I can tell you, and not to belabor specific raw materials, but there are leaders in this area. Wakanaga Kyolic Garlic has done extraordinary studies on women's health, and every time I'll go to some of their events, I walk out of there realizing how significant just taking one supplement can make. Pycnogenol, it has almost so many studies that you say to yourself, it's so good, how can it all be true? But when you're looking at the vascular system, it's not you're not saying, oh well, it's just one target, it's across the board. What happens, my experience in the companies that are coming into the industry versus the leaders that have been around, is the companies that are new will oftentimes invalidate and try and poke holes in the science because they haven't done it, or they'll use the science from another company, and that's kind of one of the earlier problems. But if you don't do this work now, and you're coming into the marketplace with raw materials, with the FDA and everything with the regulations that are happening, which are going to be more stringent as time goes on, it's going to be very difficult to sustain. And the consumer is going to find out because, as you said, third-party research, books that are written by very credible doctors and medical researchers, they're going to take it to the consumer. Before, you never had that, and social media is going to take it. So you got to do this work now. It's super valuable.
And I always say, Danielle, it's like if you know it and you know that's on your label or that's something you're not talking about yet, it's almost for sure that at least your competitors know it. And they're just waiting for the day and they're just waiting for the time to draw a distinction, to define your product, to define your brand, and use it to elevate theirs. It's just a matter of time. We see it happen all the time. Heck, we look at that with clients about ways to do it for them. So it's sort of like whether you want to be transparent or not, somebody probably knows.
I was in the cab. I was driving in New York City last week, and we were cooking. And we stopped at a red light. New York. You're there, and I'm in Utah, so we don't have problems with stoplights. We don't have people that honk horns. Nobody gets out and screams at each other. So I'm like trying to get to my appointment, and we're on the other side of town. We stopped at a light, and I turned my head and I looked over because they have those standing bulletin boards everywhere. And Chobani, the yogurt company, had a brilliant ad. And what it said is, ingredients shouldn't have numbers. So I made the cab driver stop so I could take a picture, because that's really the significant piece. If you see stuff on the label, and sometimes you'll see the chemical name, so it may look like it's not natural, but if you see numbers and you see things like that, you better step back and say, this can't possibly be natural.
Yeah.
Very important.
Absolutely, and it's so interesting. We I buy, you buy health and wellness products all the time. I do. A lot of our team here does, and we always talk about going in and watching how people shop for health and wellness products. And it's interesting. The last, we've held this practice now for 15 years. How much people do that turn, right? How we're seeing that much more now, right? I'm looking now at this label. And everybody talks about, we see that a lot more, and granted we see it heavy in places like Whole Foods and GNC, and even some of the smaller shops, but we're even starting to see it at some of the some of the bigger places like Walgreens and supermarkets, where look, the people recognize, consumers recognize, this is an investment I'm making in my health. I want to make sure it's living up to that investment, and they are doing that turn and that label check a lot more.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking of being at Nordstrom's and looking at Jimmy Choo shoes. Even though you say to yourself, I think I might buy them, but there is this natural reaction to turn it over. And the hard part for a consumer today, and also to distinguish yourself as a manufacturer, is that you've got 20 companies that are putting out the same material. So distinguishing yourself is really a challenge. That's why social media, that's why connecting with the actual consumers, that's why telling your story. Talk radio may not be big for a lot of people. Like, people say to me, I don't listen to talk radio. But I can tell you, it is the #1 location in the country for broadcasting about these raw materials and the industry. So if nothing else, AM is at least delivering a place where you can find out more information. But yeah, price, you know, the more informed you are, the more you'll pay. That's how it goes.
That's exactly it, right? And the more that you learn about it, and you learn you have to pay more for what you want, then you become even more informed, right?
Right.
We're getting some questions in from social I wanted to ask you about. Danielle, in our last few minutes here is social media still seems to be a great frontier for health and wellness brands. Some are there, some are not. What are you seeing as far as a trend, as far as brands getting the stomach for it or wanting to make an investment and have a real presence on social in order to build that trust with consumers and dialogue?
I think it's generational. I think it's a demographic play in the beginning right now. Your younger demographic is going to go there and really play it. Russell and I were talking about, I mean, it's hard. If you haven't been a player in the social media technology world, a lot of times you just feel overwhelmed. A lot of people are dropping off of Facebook. A lot of people are stopping tweeting. I think if you're in the industry or you're in the movie film industry, you're tweeting, you're doing those things. That to me is a younger demographic for now, just like computers were, and now you find older people or different generations participating. But I think that social media has to play a big role if you want to have 20, 30, 40-year-olds, because that's where they're checking. And they're also talking to their parents. And so it's going to be huge in the future. I think it'll
Yeah.
play everything, especially on mobile phones.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing. Obviously, social media is a like label. Like with the claims you make there are treated by the FDA just like what you would do on your label.
Hmm.
Obviously, you have to think about it in the sense of what you put out in ads and tweets. So I think sometimes there's still sort of risk averse. Should we be there? Are we ready to be there? But I always tell, we talk to clients a lot and say, the conversation about you is happening there whether you're there or not.
Yeah.
So it's really about, look, figuring out how you can be there and how you can participate in that conversation. And consumers are asking, if you're not there, that question's, you're not answering that question, but somebody else might be. Is it a competitor? Is it a consumer that likes another competing brand? So it really pays to be there, and I think be prepared to be there. And it's a part of the relationship, and I think does go into trust.
Yeah, and also you can't help but drive, you have to work with the search engines and you have to drive your brand to number one. And if you do it right, it will drive. If you put deep content on your site, if you're constantly changing that content, if you think about why you're doing it, don't just put a site up. Our biggest thing that's held us really for so many years, because I wasn't a techie person and I've had tremendous support, but we were pretty simple. What carried us back with people to stay on our site for up to 5 hours at a time was content. So don't think you can put a site up, put your products up, put dry content and expect people to go back. They're just not going to do it anymore. It's just our distraction level is too much and the pop-ups are too much. So you got to play the game. You have to find somebody who knows how to do that for you. If you don't know how to do it, find somebody, because plenty of people are out there that do.
And last question, Danielle, this really jumped from the questions we're getting on social is if you've lost trust, if you made a mistake and you took your hit and you lost trust or you had a recall, what is the key way to earn it back?
You have to define where you lost the trust first. Did you lose it with the industry? Did you lose it as an ingredient to the people that you're co-packing with, the brands? So it's really important to know, who did you lose trust with? If you're big enough and you lost it with the consumer, that's a hard one. That's a hard one. It's going to take recovery time. But if the brand has been consistent for a very long time, if it's new, it could kill you. If it's been consistent for a very long time, you will go back. And the consumer, if they love you, they will go back. If you make a claim on your site and you say, this is what we did, as you said, be transparent. People understand mistakes happen. They don't understand when you cover them up. So I think like you said earlier, you just have to be transparent. You got to come forward and probably put your marketing on another section of your company if you have multiple brands for a period of time while you build that back.
Yeah, and I think also I see a lot of brands when they have something like that, a recall or some other sort of crisis that hurts their trust and erodes their trust, they go higher suddenly in communication. We're going to put all this effort in. We're going to put forth how we're going to address it, and that's the right thing to do. But you have to keep it at a high level then. You start this dialogue, you have everybody listening, and then it doesn't make sense to leave the room, right? You have them listening, talk about the way forward, and set that forward, and then be consistent with it. And that insulates you. Look, mistakes are going to happen. You can talk about why they happen, and you can talk about how you're going to fix it. But you can't, it's harder to do that when you're not involved in the conversation and the dialogue and you're not consistent with it. And then, of course, who tells your story is going to be a really key thing when you recover trust. You can start by telling it and setting the way forward, but inevitably consumers have to be part of that story in order for it to be authentic.
Yeah, and I remember when you had that happen, and that client, one of your clients, where you told me what had happened, and I remember thinking, oh, there was an immediate hit to what I didn't think it was integrity, but I
Yeah.
did think, wow, will I buy that? And it's taken me a long time to kind of go back, but you are correct. If they stay in the marketplace and their distribution continues, then a consumer is going to probably say they would be off the shelves if they hadn't cleaned it up. So
Yeah.
it's a very tricky gray field, but I would say yes. Stay. It's always better to stay in the market. The more you're being talked about, the more you're driving, the partnerships that you have to stay out there as a brand. You cannot expect it to grow. It's not going to happen.
Well, Danielle, I want to thank you for your time today. And thank you for your perspective. It's been terrific. It's been a really informative session. You can keep tweeting us, by the way, with the hashtag MWW Talks Wellness. Danielle and I are on Twitter. We'll pick out some questions and answer them or have conversation about them. It's been a terrific session, and Danielle, you look terrific, and congratulations on the book. I can't wait to read it.
I know, I can't wait to. Thank you so much. It's fabulous. And I guess we're going to toast, huh?
Yeah, we're going to toast because World Cup has just kicked off. We've got our healthy beverages here. What do you have?
I have water because I think that they should hydrate. I said these guys need hydration. So here's to all of them. Good luck. And certainly hydration is the key. Make sure you're drinking that water. What do you have?
I have my Zango mangosteen juice, and it's
Ooh,
delicious. And of
yeah,
course, it's a brand that's very closely tied to soccer. So I'm going to toast you, Danielle.
yeah,
Cheers to World Cup.
yeah. Thank you so much. Well, and here's to everybody out there playing the sport and making the run. Thanks,
Uh,
John.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Great to have you for MWW Talks. Keep watch on our website. There are other sessions coming up. We'll not only be talking about wellness, but other issues as well. And just remember, you can tweet us at hashtag MWW Talks Wellness. We'll see you for the next session.